Conrad is from Louisville, Kentucky. He went to Valley High School. In fact, their Performing Arts Center is named after him there, University of Kentucky. And he embarked on a long and successful career in Hollywood. His first engagement was in the series Toby Gillis. He was in a number of shows and movies that you all have seen. And I don't want to say too much about his career because I don't want to steal his thunder about his program, but he's got a great experience as an actor and a stuntman. He's got great stories from the people he spent time with, and he is still a working actor today, and was sharing with us at the table. He's going to turn 91 next month. So, for those of you that are wondering what television sets Conrad and I met at, I got to tell you the reality is we are fans of the same soccer team. My son and his grandson play on the same Louisville City team, and we met at the soccer field. So when I heard he had this incredible story and had been to the Louisville Rotary Club, I said, "You got to come and speak to our club. We're so much better." So please join me with a LaGrange welcome for our friend and Oldham County, Conrad Bachmann. You don't need it to keep here in the back.
Oh,
I
okay.
know it. I know
And I'm gonna,
but
Conrad,
you
if I may,
walk
I'm
around
gonna put this in the mic.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Well, thank you for inviting me here today. This is quite an honor, and I have some stories. I was a little concerned. Did you hear me?
Yeah.
I had some stories. I was a little concerned about thinking about those stories on the way up here. I thought, gee, I wonder if some of these people I mentioned, if they'll know who they are, but I can look around the room and tell you that you'll know everybody that I talk about. But I have to tell you also, I've moved back here to Kentucky. As you said, I went to Valley High School, I went to UK. But the nicest cop in the world, police are so much different here than they are in LA. We got stopped on the way up here by the police because we thought we were going to run late. We ended up being here early. And the guy said to me, he said, "What is your hurry?" And I said, "I'm actually going to be speaking today at the Rotary Club." And he said, "Oh," I said, "I know some of those guys over there." He said, but he said, "Well, you were kind of rushing along here." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry about that." He said, "What was your big hurry?" I said, "Well, I'm supposed to be entertaining today for the Rotary Club." And he said, "What do you mean entertaining?" I said, "Well, I do a lot of stuff." I said, "I'm an actor from LA. I moved back here and I do a lot of juggling." He goes, "Juggling? Are you serious?" He said, "That's something I've always been interested in." This guy was so nice. He said, "You think you maybe demonstrate something?" I said, "Well, it's kind of hard out here in the middle of the freeway. I don't have anything." He said, "Just hang on a second." I swear to God, man, he goes back, he opened up the trunk of the car and he pulled out 3 flares. And I thought, oh man, I'm in serious trouble here. And then he lit them and he handed them to me. Well, I happen to be a juggler. So I was throwing these things in the air and up on my back. Another car pulled up behind him. He stopped. He gets out of the car and he goes over to the police car and he opened up. This is a true story. He opened up the back door of the car and got in, and the cop says, "Hang on a second." And he went back there. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I ain't never going to pass that test. So you might as well throw my ass in jail right now." True story. Anyway, I've been really lucky. I mean, I came out of high school. I don't even know where to begin. I don't know if I have time to tell you everything, but I was really fortunate. I ended up getting a contract. I started out as a dancer. My mother was Miss General Electric when she was like 17 years old, and she was always wanted to be in the picture business, but my grandmother wouldn't let her be. She had the opportunity. She won the contest to be the lady, the symbol on Columbia Pictures. Everybody knows the lady. It opens up with holding the torch. Well, my mother won that contest, and they wanted her to go to Hollywood, and my grandmother wouldn't let her. So she was very frustrated. And so we went to movies all the time, and she always went to musicals. In those days, I lived on a farm out in Valley Station, and we'd come in town, take the streetcar downtown to 4th Street, go to a movie, and anybody remember the Blue Boar down in Louisville? Have lunch after a movie. Well, those days it was, women wore those huge hats, and that's when you went into a movie house, and the guy had a flashlight. He told you where to go sit. And so anyway, we went to a movie one day called Good News. And I had been going to musicals with Mother, and I'd come home and I loved the dancing. And so I got my mom to get me a pair of tap shoes. And then I got my dad to get me a big sheet of plywood, and I'd go out in the garage and I would just tap. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but I would just tap and I was having fun. But one day we went to a movie called Good News. And I walked out of that movie and I said to my mother, I said, I know exactly what I want to do. I was a freshman in high school and I was a cheerleader at Valley. And I was also a cheerleader at UK, by the way. Um, so she, without hesitation, she literally went over. Anybody here remember the old National Theater building that was at Fifth and Walnut? Beautiful theater. They tore it down. But on the second floor, that was Irma Flannery School of Dance, and she registered me at tap class. And in a short time, I was teaching for my lessons, and then one thing led to another. I started doing summer stock out at Iroquois Amphitheater. And then this is kind of a long story, so I don't know if I have time to tell everything. Anyway, I ended up with a contract in 20th Century Fox Studios in LA. And I went out to LA in 1957 under contract. And in those days, I was getting like $150 to $200 a week as a day player. And I'd go to classes. And then what happened is Elizabeth Taylor was doing Cleopatra. And she wasn't showing up for work. She was stoned half the time and drunk and she was bankrupting the studio, seriously. And Spyro Skouras, who owned the studio at that time, I don't know if anybody knows LA, but the back lot was a beautiful back lot. He sold the studio in order to salvage the studio and save it. And so all of us that were under contract were let go. So now I thought, well, what am I going to do? I happened to get a WSI badge when I was in high school to teach life saving. And matter of fact, during the summer months, I was a lifeguard at Butler State Park at Carrollton during the summer. But anyway, I thought, okay, I'll go down and I'll try out for the lifeguards at the beach. So I ended up getting a job as a beach guard during the day. And at night, to make some extra money, I was parking cars at a place called Trader Vic's at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Beverly Hills. And I've parked cars for every movie star you could think of. I mean, Burt Lancaster, I mean, you name them, they all came in there. And one night, this guy who had been in there all the time, and the book I'm writing, by the way, is called It Just Happened. And the reason it's called Just Happened is the story I'm about to tell you. So this guy drove a little Carmen Kia Italian car. And so I remembered him, and I would always go get that car. And he was always drunk every time he came out. So he comes out, I get his car. Before he gets in the car, he goes, how do you always remember my car? And I said, how in the hell could you forget this car? I said, I don't even know how you get in it. Anyway, he stepped back and he looks at me and he goes, are you an actor? And I said, isn't everybody in LA an actor? And he hands me a card. I didn't think anything about it because I'm running to get cars, and I put it in my pocket. Well, the next morning, I get up, I'm having a cup of coffee and having breakfast, and I find the card and I look at it, and it says Robert Walker, head of casting, 20th Century Fox Studios. So I said, okay, I'm calling. So I called and the secretary said, who may I say is calling? I said, tell him it's the parking lot attendant at Trader Vic's. She comes back on the phone. She said, he'd like to know if you could come right over. Okay, so I get my car and I drive over to 20th and I go in and she said, well, he actually is in a meeting, but he'd like you to go down to Fox Western. That was a secondary lot that 20th had. So I get my car and I drive down to Fox Western and I walk in and two guys are sitting across from each other typing. And then one guy looks up, he goes, oh yeah, you're fine. Go back and see Bob. So what the hell is going on here? So I go back down to 20th, and I go in and he's got paperwork. He says, okay, here's the deal. We're going to do this. I said, wait a minute. What are we doing? He says, we're going to take Dobie Gillis out of high school and put him in the service, and you're going to be a badass MP. Sign here. That was my first series. After being under contract at 20th, getting laid off, coming back in, and then parking cars And I got a series with, that was Dobie Gillis, my first job. Anyway, so that's why I call my book, It Just Happened. I've got a ton of notes here. I don't know if I have time to go through everything. Let me talk about some of the people that I've met. I've worked with every actor you can think of. I'm what's called a utility actor, and believe it or not, I never wanted to be a star. I learned early in the game that once you become a star, your life is not your own. And I could go to work and I could come home and nobody bothered me. And I loved it. And I've had 4 series. I've done about close to 300 commercials, and I've done about 40 films. All the film, none of this stuff you'll remember because they're so old, although some of you may. But the one film that you probably all know is the film Tremors. How many of you have seen Tremors or remember Tremors? And I cannot get away from that movie because I'm the guy that gets eaten by the giant graboid worm and underground. And that's an interesting story. I'm getting off my subject. When I went to audition for it, I went in and read for the casting director. And of course, I did the scene the way you see it. And when I got to the section where I'm going to be eaten and pulled underground, I started screaming out loud and everything else. She said, okay, that's fine, that's fine. So then you have what's called callbacks. So on my callback, I'm now back to meet the producers, the director, and everybody else that's involved with the studio, with the film. And just as we get ready to walk in, she stops me. She says, could you do me a favor today? She said, I really have a miserable headache. Would you please not scream? Okay, so I'm trying to audition for this role. So when I get to the part about screaming, I went through the dialogue, I went through the lines, and then I went, ah! You guys will have to hang on and excuse me because she asked me not to scream today because she's got a headache. Well, the room fell apart and everybody laughed, and I ended up with the job. Anyway, that picture has haunted me. 1991, we did that movie, and that's the only one anybody remembers with me. Okay. Then there are parts that I lost that were cut out of the script. I was the dock manager in Jaws. I read for that. I got the part. And then Spielberg decided to, as they cut the script, that little role got cut. So I lost that picture. Otherwise, I would have had Jaws. But anyway, some of the people that I've met, I'm going to go down the line here. At 20th, it's a major, there's a huge building, and there are 2 sound stages. And you have a single door going in, and then you have a single door going to each sound stage. And one day I was having lunch with somebody, and I was looking back, and I was working on a picture, and I said, oh my God, I'm running late. And I left the commissary to go running over towards the studio. I open up the door, I go running in. And as I go running in, the other door opens up, and this guy comes running out. Hello? Comes running out, and we just slam at each other. I almost knock each other down, and I go, I'm sorry. I look up, and it's Jimmy Stewart. I run into Jimmy Stewart. He was next door doing another movie. I go up to visit my agent one day. They were in a building on Sunset Boulevard, just outside of Beverly Hills. It's about a 10-story building. And after my meeting, I get in the elevator. I go down a couple of floors, the door opens up, Kenny Rogers steps in. Now I'm in an elevator with Kenny Rogers by myself, a kid from Kentucky in an elevator with Kenny Rogers. So I was sort of starstruck, and we're going down. I said, you know, you're not going to believe this. He says, what's that? I forgot what floor I parked on. He said, well, that's not a problem. I'll hold the door. So next floor stops. Kenny opens up the door, and he's holding the elevator door while I went out and looked around. I said, no, this is not the right floor. We did about 3 floors like that, and I found my car, Kenny Rogers. God, I'm trying to think of, I parked cars for Burt Lancaster and Cliff Roberts, and let's see. I should be able to run right through this, but I got so much going in my head that oh, I've got this is a good one. I also took a part-time job for J.W. Robinson's department store during Christmas to make some extra money, and I was delivering packages, Christmas packages. So I'm delivering packages to different houses, and all these different stars opened up their doors. But anyway, right at the base of Coldwater Canyon in the Beverly Hills, Barbara Stanwyck lived, and I was delivering a package to Barbara Stanwyck. So I pulled into her driveway and she is standing out in front of the house. So I got out and I got the package. She said, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're here." And I said, "Why?" She said, "I've locked myself out of the house. Could you help me?" I said, "Okay." She said, "Around the side over here is a window, but I can't reach to get into it. If you could get into that window and go through there, you take a left and come back around and open up the front door for me." Okay. So I climb up through the window. I'm crawling across her desk, and the first thing I see is a picture from Eisenhower's. Is lots of love, Babs, Ike, Anyway, I go through the house, I come out, and I open up the front door. I still laugh when I do this. I opened up the front door, and there's Barbara standing there, and I said, "Hey, Barb, how are you? Thanks for stopping by." She laughed so hard that we both just stood there and laughed. I mean, what a great experience. And then in that same area, I delivered, remember Marion Davies? That was William Randolph Hearst's mistress. Well, he built her this incredible house down on Santa Monica Beach. And I used to park cars down there, and she would come in all the time and drove a little sports car. And so I'd park her car all the time and with a lot of movie stars. But anyway, I was delivering packages, and she lived right up the street from Barbara. She had a 5-acre plot right off Coldwater Canyon. So I'm taking the packages in through the back door into the kitchen and everything else. And she comes in and she sees me and she says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm making some extra Christmas money. I'm delivering packages for Robinsons." She gave me $100 tip. Anybody remember Marion Davies? Okay, well, if you watch the movie with Orson Welles, you'll remember who she is. I spent 4 years in the Air Force. I was lucky. I auditioned for special services and got into it. That's the entertainment branch of the Air Force. And every year they have a talent contest, and I would win that every year in my category until we now put a show together called Tops in Blue, and we traveled all over the world doing shows for military hospitals and such. And then I ended up over at Okinawa, and a group of us from different sections of the country, and we put together another show. And then we traveled all through the Far East doing shows. And we were called Sky High. But then we did a show in Korea. Anybody here ever go to Korea? Okay, well, it was an interesting experience. And so we landed at the base, and we were there maybe for an hour and a half, getting ready and unloading equipment. When all of a sudden, sirens started going off, and they started screaming, "Hit the slits, hit the slits." We didn't know what the hell we were talking about. They were talking about slit trenches because we were attacked. And here comes all these planes, and they're strafing and bombing and everything else. And we're just a bunch of entertainers. We had no idea what was going on. Anyway, they finally said, "You got to get those entertainers out of here." We ended up not doing the show that day, and they got us back to Okinawa. So then they decided that since we were going into war zones, that we needed to learn how to fight. So I got assigned to a 50 caliber machine gun. On this machine gun was myself as the dancer. Then we had Ted Day, who was a magician, and he was the MC. Norm Reich, who was the announcer at Madison Square Gardens, and Jimmy Schofield, who was the Eddie Fisher of the Air Force, and a bunch of us, and then the piano player and the drummer. And we would then sit there, and we were trained how to use a machine gun, 50 caliber. I was in charge of the barrel, very heavy. Anyway, so now the Marines decide to locate themselves on Okinawa. And they decide that, Marines just don't come in, they have to land. And so it was sort of a mock war. And we were established on this little hill to protect that hill, so to speak. And I'm looking out there, and here comes all these Marines and the landing craft. They land the beach. And meanwhile, we're sitting there talking about next month's show, a bunch of entertainers on a machine gun. And the next thing we know, a little thing popped up where we were sitting there and goes, and this smoke comes up. And we thought, what the hell is that? We just discovered that we'd been killed. The SEALs had gotten up on the beach. We didn't even notice it. And they'd gotten up beside us, and they were to take out the machine gunners. So then I found out that a machine gunner was just nothing more to hold you down and slow you down. Your life was, you know, it was all over with. Okay. I should have been, okay, God. I usually don't have to stop and look at my notes, but, oh, God, you're gonna love this. In the early days, we would draw unemployment. And so you go down to the Santa Monica, to the unemployment office, and you would draw unemployment, and they would ask you a bunch of questions. And I used to bump, I mean, you see all your movie stars down there. I can remember standing in line with Barbara Eden and Michael Lancero, who she was married to at that time, to a lot of silent movie stars, Adolphe Manjou. Anyway, so, and Tab Hunter, I mean, you could name them all off. They were all there drawing their unemployment checks. Then it came into where you had to have, you had to answer a series of questions in order to get your check, because they didn't like us coming up there in swimming trunks and shorts and some signs. They put up some signs that said, no actors will be paid in shorts or swimming trunks. So that put a stop to that. So anyway, one day we're in line and I'm standing in line, and just ahead of me is Louis Nye. Anybody remember Louis Nye, stand-up comic? So when you get up to the desk, the girl says to me, she says to the person she's interviewing, she said, so you're still in the business? Yes, I am. Do you have a manager? Yes, I do. What are you doing to find work? Well, I'm checking with the studios, and I read the trade papers every day. You still have an agent? Yes, I do. And what is your agent doing to find work? And Louis looked at her and he says, well, I don't know, but why don't you wait and ask him? He's 3 behind me. It was funnier than hell. Anyway, that's a true story. Anybody remember Francis X. Bushman? I mean, I'm really going back. He was a huge silent movie star, and I saw him and met him one day in the unemployment line. If you wanted to meet movie stars in the early, when was that? 50s, go to the unemployment office. Oh, you know what? And then there's something else I remember when I first got there. One of the first series that I did is that, well, Toby Gills was my really first series, but the one after that was a series called The Rogues. And I'm sitting in the dressing room in my makeup chair, and sitting next to me, now I'm a kid off a farm in Kentucky, sitting next to me is Charles Boyer. I'm sitting there going, my God, my mother, my parents, like Charles Boyer. And then in walked David Niven. And then after David Niven came in, Gig Young. And I was in a series of them called The Rogues. But I mean, to be sitting in a makeup chair as a kid from Kentucky with Charles Boyer, having seen all those great movies that he did, and especially with Ingrid Bergman, you know, when he drove her crazy. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Okay. Oh, I got a series called Tales of a Golden Monkey. I don't know if anybody remembers that or not. Anyway, I was one of the leads in it. And when I went to audition for it at Universal Studios, I went in to read and I auditioned with one line. And the line was, I was afraid he was going to do that. And that was my line. And so when I sat down to read, then I got a call back. And on the call back, I'm sitting there in the casting office with the producer, and he says, he brought in a radio guy. I was playing captain of this destroyer, which was a spy ship. And I had a radio man, and he was auditioning both of us. And so he said, would you mind staying a little longer? No. So he brings in this new kid, and the kid does his dialogue. And I said, I was afraid he was going to do that. He said, well, thank you very much. Get ready to go. And he says, no, hold on a second. He said, I've got another actor out there. And so he brought in another actor. The kid says, does these lines. And I said, I was afraid he was going to do that. Well, I went through this about 7 or 8 times. And now I'm getting a little bored. I'm going, this guy's really taking advantage of me. Anyway, he said, well, that's fine. Thank you very much. He said, you can go to wardrobe now. I went, what? He said, you go to wardrobe now. So I called my agent. I said, Herman, I'm just over here reading for Don Belisario was the producer. I said, I went through this series of about 7 or 8 guys reading this one line, and now they want me to go to wardrobe. He said, don't say anything. You've been hired, and they've not called me. Now, by not calling him before they told me that, raised my money because it put him in a better position to negotiate my money. And I did okay on that. The problem is I fell off a wall, broke my leg, and lost the series. Talk about luck. I don't know. Okay. Anybody have any questions or anything on Matlock? Oh, there's a great story. Andy Griffith is the nicest guy in the world, but let me tell you something. If you watch that show today and watch it really carefully, and you watch Andy, Andy talks here, he talks there, he talks down here, he talks there, he talks over here. Every now and then you'll see him directly look at that actor. But let me tell you what he's doing. When I was a judge on Matlock. All his dialogue was all over my chest. He had dialogue up here, he had dialogue on me, he had dialogue on the wall, he had dialogue on the floor. And then when the camera turned on me, of course, I had to know all the lines. But when it went back on Andy, he had all his dialogue all over the place. But it was a great lesson. Every time you do a show, you learn a new trick in the business. And so I started using the same thing. When I got into the parts where the dialogue was hard to learn, I just said, give me some boards, or I would pin it on the actor in front of me. When they go over my shoulder, he would have the dialogue, and then vice versa. When it would come over on me, then I'd have the dialogue all over him. But Andy had dialogue all over everybody. If you watch it close, you can see him looking all over the place. And it's because he's reading his lines. Yes.
Did you ever have the opportunity to dance with Fred Astaire or Ginger Rogers?
No, I knew Ginger. I played
Yeah.
tennis with Ginger, but I never did meet Fred. I did meet Donald O'Connor, and that was a happenstance one day at the Beverly Hills Hotel. But I always did want to meet him because I loved Fred Astaire, all the dancers, and the other person that I always wanted to meet and never got to meet was June Allison.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan Daly. Okay. But no, I'd love to have met Fred Astaire.
Yeah.
He was a good friend of my wife's family, but I never got to meet him because they, yeah. I can't hear you. Oh, I did tell you my Maryland story. And that made me just think of something else now that I forgot it. Okay, anyway, Maryland, when we did the tour through Korea and Japan and everything else, and Maryland was with us on that tour, we came back and one of the generals was throwing a cocktail party at his house. And Maryland was at the party. We were sitting on the couch together and everything else. And I probably shouldn't tell this story, but it's where I learned how to smoke. Everybody in that room had a cigarette. And I looked down at the table and there was a box of Parliaments. And so I picked up one and she said, now you shouldn't do that because you'll get started. I no, I'll be fine. Anyway, I ended up smoking Parliaments for I don't know how many years. However, one night parking cars at Trader Vic's, in pulls this limousine, and I opened up the door and it's Marilyn. And I get ready to hand it. She says, what are you doing here? I said, I'm parking cars. I'm making extra money. Well, we're talking about now Korea, and we're talking about Japan, and we're talking about the party and smoking. I said, and I quit smoking. Meanwhile, the manager of Trader Vic's was running out, and he says, what the hell's going on out here? Because traffic was backing up on Santa Monica like you couldn't believe. And he says, get those cars out of here, and you're fired, Bachmann. And she said, you fire him, and I'll never step foot in this place again. He said, you're hired, but get those cars out of here. That's the last time I saw her. She was a sweetheart. She was really a sweetheart. She was the nicest person I've ever known in my life. I mean, yeah.
So we hear that you also did some stunts as well.
I did. That's another interesting story. Thank you for bringing these up because I was on location up in Denver. I did a lot of work up in Denver. They did a lot. I did probably close to 300 commercials. Don't let me forget that. I'll come back to that story. But anyway, I was at a bar having a drink with somebody while I was on location. And this guy comes up to me and he says to me, he said, anybody ever tell you you look a little bit like Bing Crosby? And I went, I've never heard that in my life. He says, well, we're getting ready to do a movie up here. He says, we're looking for a double for a stand-in for Bing Crosby. Would you be interested? I'm in a bar in Denver. And I said, well, let's talk about it. Anyway, I ended up doubling and doing all the stunt work for Bing Crosby in the remake of Stagecoach. I mean, that's why my story is it's called It Just Happened. Now, remember I said, don't let me forget, what was I going to say?
Commercial.
That's right. Okay. So in the early days, actors didn't do commercials. Those were models. And we sort of looked down upon those because we didn't understand commercials. God, that brings up another story. So anyway, the girl I was dating at the time was with one of the biggest talent agencies in Hollywood. She called me up. She says, you're so right for this commercial. You need to go audition for it. And I said, I don't do commercials. Actors don't do commercials. She said, I'm telling you, you're so right for this. You should go to it. Okay. So I sneaked into the audition. And in those days, they would bring everybody in and they would just go down the line and say, you know, you stay and you stay, you stay, you stay, you stay. The rest of you, thank you for coming in. And so then everybody would leave except for those that would ask to stay. And then you'd go in and you'd audition, and you'd interview, and you'd come out, and either you stayed or you'd leave. And I was noticing this. Guys would go in, they'd come out, they'd stay. Another guy go in, come out, he'd leave. It kept going like that until finally it gets down, there's two of us in the room. He goes in, he comes out, he says, congratulations. Okay. They come bursting through the door and they say, congratulations, you're our guy. Now, mind you, I had never done a commercial. I had no idea what I was doing. And they said, congratulations, you're our guy. I went, oh my God, I'm in serious trouble. They said, who's your agent? So I said, well, Rita Leroy, where my girlfriend worked, and she was the biggest modeling agency in LA. And I said, Rita Leroy. So the next morning, my phone rings, hello, and I get, who in the is this? I said, who in the is this? She said, well, I'm Rita Leroy. How dare you to go into a commercial and use my name? And I said, well, would you like the 10%? At that time it was 10%. Anyway, I signed up with her. I spent 2 days in a Pontiac convertible, 1961, 2 days in a Pontiac convertible with the top down with this model, waving and smiling and driving while they're photographing us. And guess who the girl was? Linda Gray from Dallas, which I ended up being the Rolls Royce salesman and owned the dealership on Dallas with Linda. Now what? I forgot now. I need to make some notes here. Yeah, any other questions?
First off, that doesn't sound like much of a stunt. That sounds like a treat. It was like falling into the car, you know, doing something along those lines.
I have to tell you, I had more fun. Then I went on to do a lot more stunt stuff, but it was because of that. But I have to tell you that we spent about a month and a half up in Denver shooting, and then the Apache Indians, that they had real Apache Indians, but they got drunk every day, and they couldn't figure out where they were getting the fire water, and so they kept eliminating the Indians. And then Marty Rackin, who was the producer on that, came up to me and he says, look, he said, when you're not in a stagecoach, he said, could you play an Indian? So, and I grew up on a farm, and, you know, out in the Valley Station, had horses, so I rode well. And that's what really got me started. So I started playing an Apache Indian. And then one day we were shooting just outside Denver. Gordon Douglas was the director, and he was in a helicopter because it was a helicopter shot where the stagecoach was coming down along behind this hill we were on, and we were to come charging off the hill and go charging after the stagecoach while it's running. The Indians would be, we don't know where they got the booze, but they were drunk, but they would put their rifles up against the horse's rump with the wad in it and fire, and the horse would leap. So, you know, it spooked the horse. Anyway, we're on this ridge, and here comes the stagecoach, and we're getting ready to make the charge down this hill now, and the Indians all fired their rifles up against the horse's rump, and we leaped off that cliff and went running down. If you watch the picture, you'll see this is one hell of a run down that hill. And what they didn't tell us when the stagecoach was running along the bottom, what they didn't tell us was that the bottom was a marsh. Well, by the time we hit that marsh, those horses went into it, and a lot of them went down. And Gordon, of course, thought it was great because it looked like the Indians were getting killed. And meanwhile, he's hollering "cut" in the helicopter. He's on a big megaphone, and the Apaches didn't quit. Full war paint, and they kept riding down into a little town that was just outside of Netherland there, and scared the hell out of everybody in town as they came roaring in on their horses in full war paint.
Oh,
But the guy that was the most fun on that picture I hung out with was Slim Pickens. Slim was a handful. Oh, he was a handful. And my other good friend that I ran around a lot with, because I did a lot of, was Mike Connors. He had a television show. I forget what the show was called.
Mannix?
Matlock, yeah. Or no. Anyway, but he was a super, super nice guy. I found most of the actors, there were a few that were sort of obnoxious that you just, you tolerate them. But most of them were just regular people, down to earth with jobs. They're just doing a job they're getting paid for. And it was just, I mean, I was just very lucky. That's why the book that I'm putting together, and I keep making notes, it's called It Just Happened, because my whole life in this business just happened. It's just like being at the soccer game, and now here I am here speaking to you all, you know. Oh, you know what? And then I decided, I'll tell you what did it. I was in a film, and the guy called me up. This happened twice, as a matter of fact. I better make a note on this one so I don't forget this, because it has to do with Foster Brooks. You remember Foster?
Oh, gosh.
Anyway, I was in a film, and the guy calls me up, and he says, have you ever been to Kentucky? Yeah, why? He says, we've just been invited into a little film festival in Kentucky called the Bluegrass Film Festival. It was in Goshen. So anyway, I come back to Goshen, and I do this film festival with our film that was in it. And they were in the judges' chambers, they were in church, they were just all over the place. And I said to the guy at the closing night party, I said, why aren't you in Louisville? He said, well, this is the home of D.W. Griffith. Now, there was another famous person from Kentucky. I mean, a racist filmmaker, but he was from Kentucky. And so anyway, I turned to my partner at that time, because what had happened is here's another one. I get a phone call from a friend of mine who's a professional golfer. He says, I'm doing a golf tournament. They're looking for some tennis players. I was a big tennis player. Remember I said earlier that I played tennis with some people. Anyway, he said, they're looking for some tennis players. And I said, okay, what is it about? He said, some guy named Foster Brooks in Louisville, Kentucky. So I come back and I'm doing the Foster Brooks golf tournament. Only I'm playing tennis in his thing, and one thing led to another. So Foster became ill and couldn't handle it. So he asked me if I would take it over. And so I got a hold of Ned, a friend of mine. We were doing a play in LA together. I said, Ned, I've got this with Foster, and he wants me to come in and try it. Would you come with me? So Ned and I took it over and ran it for a long time until Ned got to a point where he really couldn't see anymore. So I'd always have to make an excuse about he was on location. That's why he wasn't there. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? And then this picture came up about Kentucky. So I turned to my partner. I said, let's start a film festival. That was 15 years ago. So we started Louisville's International Festival of Film. And it has just grown like you can't believe. And our opening night is Thursday night, October 5th. It runs for 3 days. We've got like 140 some films in it, I think, right? And our opening night is this Thursday night, this coming Thursday. And so that's why I brought all these little things. Cindy and I did a personal appearance with me doing From Tremors out at the Oldham County Fair this year. And we had a booth out there. And we had these little packages giving everybody 50% off on tickets. So I just thought maybe I'd spread them out. And if any of you are interested, there's your opportunity to come and see some films. We've got some great films. The opening night film is a local film this year, made by a teacher at Fern Creek High School. And actually the closing night film is called Roach Motel. I know. It's a couple of assassins who are out to kill somebody. And that's our closing night film. And then we've got a ton of films in between. If you go to Louisville's International Festival of Film website, the whole program is on there with all of the films. And there's some really incredible films on there. So any other questions? Are we running out of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have one. We don't have any.
Oh, I guess one more quick story. Just one more because of Kentucky. It's a friend of mine. Actually, he called up his wife. He said, listen, a bunch of us are going to go fishing this weekend. Would you do me a favor and put some stuff together for me? I'll come by and pick it up and put in those that silk blue pajamas you just bought me. She said, okay. So he went fishing. He came back and she said, how was the trip? He said, it was awesome. He said, can't believe all the crappie and the fish I caught and the trout I caught and everything else. He said, but by the way, he said, I thought I asked you to put that pair of silk blue pajamas in there for me. She said, I did. He said, you did? She said, yeah, they were in your tackle box. That's it, man.
Thank you so much, Conrad. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can you come up front, please?
Oh, you want everybody?
Hmm?
I really do appreciate,
did.
you know,
Okay.
I have to tell you, I just think I'm a regular guy next door, but I just don't think about everything I've done. It is kind of exciting, I guess, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Very exciting. You've had led an awesome life, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's
So-
been fun.
That's awesome. Well, we want to say thank you so very much for attending our
Oh, thank you.
Rotary meeting. And I have something for you. If Matt, are we good?
This is scary.
Another person's going.
Is it alive?
Donation is gonna be made.
Hey, what?
A donation.
Donation will be made in your name. So we appreciate it very
Oh,
kindly
thank you.
to eradicate
Oh,
polio.
wow.
Thank you.
Is
Yes,
it to
sir.
my drinking club?
Home of bourbon now, you know.
No, okay. Can I, yeah, there we go. Can we get a picture up here, please? Thank you. Jonathan, would you like to come up since you brought?
Got it.
We got it.
Oh, good.
All right, we got it.
Thank you.
Is this,
Oh, wait a
is
minute.
this
One
the
more.
official photographer?
One of them.
No,
Yeah.
it is.
Thank you. This is one of our coins. It is the four-way test that you heard us recite earlier. It's on the back of it, and it's got the LaGrange Rotary symbol on the very front of it.
Oh,
And we
wow.
want to present this to you so you will remember us for always and forever, and maybe bring us into one of your films. Ha,
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
thank you.
Quite a,
We appreciate you being here.
well, I appreciate it. It's quite an honor to be asked, and thank you again. We just met out on a soccer field with my grandson.
That's
so
awesome.
Just happened.
It just happened.
It just happened.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good deal. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see.
Thank you all.
All right, I did not get a ticket, so I will do the honors of drawing one.
Current lot is $572.
All right, our number will be 932.
How much longer will you?
93. Steve Schultz. All right.
Oh, because we got to get to,
That's it. That's what, yeah, we right away.
Yeah.
thank you again for asking me.
Coming.
All right, you old guy, get up there.
Hmm?
You gotta spin the wheel.
Oh, yeah. Let's.
All right. Got a purple.
Merple.
Tell me more about your school teacher.
500 and how much? There it is.
I forgot to tell my Marlon Brando. I forgot to tell my Marlon Brando
pizza.
story.
Oh, thanks.
He'd rather have the pizza.
Have to have you back sometime.
Well, there was-
Especially if you do the food.
There was a little club, little beer bar down where I lived in Santa Monica Canyon. And we would all hang out there. There was Marlon Brando and Rod Stewart, Rod Taylor, Bomber Kokovich,
Oh, my gosh.
Lee Marvin when he was just getting started. And we would all sit there and drink beer.
That's good.
I have a question for you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever have the opportunity to meet Donald Belisario?
That's who I worked for.
And you met him personally?
But he was that's who I did the series for, Don
There
Belisario.
he is.
You know it?
I'll help you get these up.
My grandmother was Irene Belisario,
Oh,
and her brothers, one of them was Donald, went to LA to work in Hollywood,
well, he was a big producer.
but they lost touch when he left. And so we've never made contact with him. But
Did you just get here, Ashley?
brother
Did
was
you just get
Donald
here?
B. Belisario.
That's who I worked for.
And so we
I was
never-
looking for you to
never
take
been
some
able to make
pictures, but
contact.
I couldn't see you.
Big famous person that he didn't want to-
Yeah, Don.
I got you.
That's who I was telling the story about the
gotcha.
audition. It was for Don.
And that's why I wanted
Gotcha,
to ask,
gotcha,
because
gotcha.
we've never- Of course, I mean, I don't know people from Hollywood, so we've never been able to meet him. We've never known about him, and I was just wondering like what he was like, and you know,
Was
he
it
a
true?
homeless? Yeah, dude.
How do I say this?
I'll just say it. You don't have to sugarcoat anything.
He was a prick.
I'm telling you.
Let me tell you what happened. I was at the house and I was having a fence put in. And the contractor asked me to come out and
Yes,
see
ma'am.
what
Thank you.
level he wanted it. So I went to look at it and I slipped and tore the putters into my leg. This is the series
Thanks
I'm
for your
doing
help
for
today.
Don.
Yeah, thank you,
Appreciate
Steve.
it.
So I
You bet.
called the
Yeah.
studio and I said, I just fell, broke my leg, and I have to go to the hospital. But I said, I can still finish the show if you get to me right away, and I take my leg up. He never called me back, never said anything. So the casting director said, if you could tape that leg, we could finish you. 9 days later, I finally got to the set. And it was a scene that was we were at sea, I was the sea captain, and they had thousands of gallons of water, so that when the doors opened up, all this water came rushing in, because I'm on a destroyer. If you watch that show, you can see the pain in my face, because we grip taped my leg so that I could get to the set and do the scene. I did the scene, and as soon as the director said,